Hi everybody, and welcome back to Solo Female Van Life Lessons. I'm Santina Doyle, and we host Solo Female Van Life Lesson meetups every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you're interested in joining us live, please go out to Meetup and search for Solo Female Van Life Lessons in the Oxford, Pennsylvania area, and you should be able to join. Today's lesson is lesson 5 and 6 actually combined. We had two meetings where we discussed fear, which is a big topic for many solo females. Fear kind of revolves around the unknown and not knowing once we get on the road, things like, can we take care of ourselves? What's going to happen if I break down? How easy is it to find parking spaces that I won't get the knock? Those kinds of topics. And what we discussed on the call live is that fear is real. I don't want to give anyone the impression that in discussing fear that anyone is able to say your fear is not valid, because that's not true. Everyone's fear is a valid fear. Whether the fear is rational or not is another topic, however. So most of us have rational fears, but when we look back in our lifetime, we don't see evidence that those fears have come true. And that's where we can take a reasonable step to move forward, even if we have a fear, knowing that most likely that fear is not going to come to fruition. And here's an example. So a lot of women on the call said that they were very fearful of breaking down. It's a real fear, and it happens. But if they look back in their lifetime with their current vehicle, they might not have had very many experiences breaking down. And part of that unfamiliarity might be part of the fear for them. Now, if they have purchased a vehicle and had an inspection of that vehicle before they purchased it, and if before they hit the road, they do a vehicle safety check like I proposed in, I think it was our third lesson, then the possibility of them having an issue and breaking down is mitigated to a certain extent, to a lesser risk, that's for sure. So for instance, if you check your oil before you get on the road and notice that your oil is really low, almost empty, and you fill your oil reservoir with oil, then of course you're not going to blow out your engine because it didn't have enough oil on the drive. And so you're going to mitigate that fear by doing some practices that are very practical and very easily performed, even for women who are not mechanically inclined. It just takes a little bit of learning and experiencing how to check your oil before you feel comfortable doing it. And you look back and say, I could have done this all along, right? I don't need to rely on a man to check my oil or the pressure of my tires. So when you look back, if you have a particular fear and you look back on how many times that fear has actually come to pass and become an incident or an event, if it hasn't happened very often, then it most likely isn't going to happen very often in your new rig or your existing rig. The probabilities remain the same. After all, as solo female van life women, we're just going out there in a vehicle, driving around, just like we do when we're in a sticks and bricks. We go to a supermarket or a shopping center or wherever we're going for coffee. The probabilities are relatively the same. I mean, we are going greater distances most likely, but at the same time, probability is probably relatively the same whether we're going those long distances or short distances driving around from a sticks and bricks. And what I would say is to address your fear, address it head on. And if you're a journaling kind of person, maybe that's the way you go, or maybe you're just going to talk it out with a trusted friend who will give you her rational perspective on whether that fear is something that you should listen to and it should stop you from doing van life or going to that particular destination, or if that fear could be conquered and you could move on from it. So one of the reasons why we have the in-person meetup group is that we can talk about such things, and women who are experiencing fear in a particular area can throw it out there to the very supportive solo female van life wannabes and discuss whether or not it's something that should prevent them from getting on the road or not. So mechanical failure of their vehicle and not knowing how to address it was probably the primary fear on the meetings. And then what I would say is that how you address it is how you would address it if you're in the sticks and bricks just going to the grocery store. You want to have a plan. You want to know how you're going to handle different situations. So if you have a flat tire, you want to know whether or not you have a spare, where it's located, and how to change it. Or you want to have a service like AAA who will come out and change it for you. You might want to have an apparatus that blows up a flattened tire so that you can get to a station to change it. You just want to have a plan and know what you're comfortable with. Some women are comfortable getting that tire rod out and loosening the lug nuts and changing their spare. Other women don't want to do that, don't know how to do it, and aren't interested in learning, and that's fine too. In those cases, you just want to have some kind of process in place. Like I said, AAA or one of those other services. You want to have emergency contacts in the area that you can contact that can come out and be with you so you're not alone on the road and you have some support that way. You just always want to know, what are you gonna do? So look at maybe the most likely scenarios and breaking down a flat tire, your engine quits, transmission quits, any of those scenarios, and know how you're going to get off the road safely, what your priority is. Do you have little orange triangles that you can put out to remain safe on the shoulder, etc. Just think through it. Think through it as if I were to get a flat tire today while I was driving, what would I do? Who would I call? What would I try? And then, practice some skills such as changing the tire, or maybe just practice the skill of calling a tow truck in an area that you're not familiar with. So in Google Maps, you would just say, tow truck service near me, and if you have an internet signal, getting that web page and then getting their phone number and knowing that you could call them. If you're not in a place where you're going to have internet signal, if you're going out west, for example, then you want to know what your backup plan is. If you don't have an internet signal, do you feel comfortable flagging down someone to help you and drive you to a mechanic's or calling a tow truck for you? What are your boundaries? How do you know that you can remain safe if some stranger is pulling off the side of the road and is helping you? Does it mean you stay in your vehicle with your doors locked and you crack your window and just ask them to call for you? Does it mean you get out and watch them or help them change your tire? You have to know what your boundaries are. And when you're nervous because something has just happened to you, that's not the time to figure out what your boundaries are. Know, as a solo female woman out there who has certain fears that are reasonable, that you're going to figure out what your boundaries are in advance of anything happening so that when it happens, you know exactly what you're comfortable with. Do you carry mace on your keychain? There's all kinds of things that you can do to make sure that you feel as safe as possible if something were to happen. So what I would recommend about fear is don't be afraid of fear and don't let it stop you. Bounce off your fears with other solo female van life wannabes. See if they're reasonable. See what other women are planning to do about their fears, whether they're going to surpass them and get on the road and do this van lifestyle anyway. What they're planning on doing. Are they getting a spot SOS device? What are their plans? Take some cues from them and go out and do it anyway. And as you experience certain fears, sit and ponder and think about how you could alleviate some of that fear, what you're going to do in those situations if that situation comes true, and think about, really, can you handle yourself? If you get a flat tire on the way to the grocery store, it's just the same as if you get a flat tire on the way across country. You're going to handle it the same way. And so think about it, and maybe it'll even make you realize that you don't have fear about going to a grocery store, but you do have fear about driving 3,000 miles across country. But if the circumstances are the same and an incident happens and you handle it the same way, maybe we should be fearful about going to the grocery store. I don't know. I don't recommend that. I recommend we identify what our fears are. We then, while we're calm and not in a situation, figure out what our boundaries are, figure out what our plan A, B, and C will be. And then some of that fear settles and we feel like maybe we're not so fearful and that we can actually do it. So if you have any questions or doubts, get on to Meetup and look for solo female van life lessons on Meetup near Oxford, Pennsylvania. You might have to change your location, but search for us. Come on the meetings Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time and come join us for that discussion. Thank you for listening to me about fear and how to tackle fear when you want to be a solo female van lifer, and I hope to see you on the road. Take care.